Okay, we're up to the second paragraph in Eis Daled. Okay. We said that in the mile of mitzvahs over Torah is the fact that mitzvahs bring about a higher hamshacha, and that's connected with the fact that mitzvahs have the factor of bittul, unlike Torah, and that mitzvahs have the advantage of ishapcha chasheichel and ahira. The birur of Gashmis is with mitzvahs. So the difference between these two inyanim is that the mile of mitzvahs, that they're mamshech a higher that's higher than ishtalshalus, is more in the time of the Beis Hamikdash and the mitzvahs bizman habayis than the mitzvahs bizman hagolus, because the true bittul is only when there's re'iyah and elikus. Einanu yechelim lalis v'leirois l'shtachves. So therefore, that's bizman habayis, bizman hagolus. The mitzvahs don't have that proper bittul, and therefore the hamshacha isn't as great. The mile of ishapcha chasheichel nehera, the mitzvahs have this accomplishment of changing the cheshach to that's mainly in the mitzvah shebizman hagolus, because the cheshach, the darkness, is much more intense, much greater bizman hagolus. So therefore, if we want to say the giluyim of la'asid lavei, if we want to discuss whether they're totally in mitzvahs shebizman hagolus mainly, or they're totally in mitzvahs in all times, mainly bizman habayis, it depends which aspect of the giluyim, the la'asid lavei, we're talking about. The giluyim, that la'asid lavei will see begoli the accomplishment of mitzvahs where mamshech the elikus that's higher than ishtalshalus. That gilui of la'asid lavei is dependent primarily on the mitzvahs that we did bizman Beis Hamikdash, because they accomplished this hamshacha. They bring down this high air more than the mitzvah shebizman hagolus, because they have the advantage of bittul. When we're talking about that la'asid lavei will be nizgala, the achievement that we had by changing cheshach la'er, this yisrein ha'er that comes mitech ha'cheshach, this will be begoli la'asid lavei. That results mainly from the mitzvah shebizman hagolus that have a greater mile of ishapcha chasheichel neir. So this is going to lead up to explain the question in the beginning of the Maamar, why it doesn't say HaBaim in the Tzemach to explain HaBaim. But first he's going to explain something else. So now he's going to ask a question. So fine. This, that mitzvahs change cheshach ta'ir, they have a mailas hapcha chasheichel neira, this is mainly bizman hagolus. In the time of golus there's a cheshach. So when we're talking about the advantage of mitzvahs that they change cheshach ta'ir, so then we can understand that the giluyim de la'asid lavei, whatever we're going to see when Mashiach comes, it is dependent on, and it results from the mitzvahs that we do bizman hagolus. Even though when Mashiach comes we'll still do mitzvahs, but those mitzvahs won't have so much the aspect and the advantage of changing cheshach ta'ir. There's no cheshach when Mashiach comes. But when we're talking about the mile of mitzvahs, that mitzvahs is an expression of the person's bittul with doing a davar gashmi, doing a physical act, and therefore they bring down the eir shel ha'mayla mishtalshalus. So we're going to do mitzvahs when Mashiach comes also. Then in that aspect of mitzvahs, why are they dependent on anything today at all? It should be enough the mitzvahs that we do then to bring about the hamshacha. V'yesh leimar, that the gilui of the mitzvahs themselves, meaning the gilui of the hamshacha that results from the mitzvahs. Hamshacha se'er del shalamayla mishtalshlos. Tali b'maseinu v'avedaseinu achshav is tali, it's dependent on some preparation on mitzvahs that we do prior to Mashiach, even if it's not specifically the mitzvahs shebizman hagolus. We said that's mainly in the mitzvah shebizman habayis, but why do you even need the mitzvahs in the time of the Beis Hamikdash? It shouldn't be tali in anything. We do then mitzvahs, so we have everything then, seemingly. It says, Hagam shegam la'asid lavei yekiyim ha'mitzvahs l'cheirev. This needs only mitzvahs, and mitzvahs in their greatest way of performance with the greatest bittul. So when is the mitzvah at its greatest way? at the highest way of being performed, that's when Mashiach comes. Va'adirabba, kiyum ha-mitzvahs az yeh betachlis hashleimus. The epitome of mitzvahs, the ultimate way of doing mitzvahs, will be the way we do them when Mashiach comes. Like we say always, V'sham nasa lefanecha k'mitzvahs ritzenecha. There, when Mashiach comes, then we'll do k'mitzvahs ritzenecha, then they'll be completely the way the Eibishter wants. Then they'll be with the complete bittul. So seemingly they should have the ability to bring about the greatest hamshacha. Why do we need anything in advance for that? Umemela gam hamshacha shal yidei mitzvahs, the hamshacha through the mitzvahs when Mashiach comes, which will be betachlis hashleimus, tia betachlis hashleimus will be the greatest hamshacha. It shouldn't be dependent on anything prior. The answer to that is who? Ki b'chtei shala asid lave tia shleimus hamshacha da mitzvahs. It's true. The greatest mitzvahs, the time when the performance of the mitzvahs will be in the greatest level, will be when Mashiach comes. But everything has to be gradual. In order for us to have that great epitome of Kiyum HaMitzvahs, ultimate way of doing mitzvahs, when Mashiach comes, it has to be a preparation. We have to get to there. We have to build up to that, and the build-up is the mitzvahs that we do during the entire period until Mashiach comes. In order to get that, Hual Yidei Kedimas HaHamshacha de HaMitzvahs is through the accomplishment of the mitzvahs, Kamei Hu Achshav, that we do now, that prepare, that lead up to this ultimate way of doing mitzvahs when Mashiach comes. Olahar, the Rabbi says, we'll give a little bit of an example to the concept that even though you have something at its greatest level, but you have to build up to it. An example to that is Meha mitzvahs to ha'avis, the mitzvahs that the avis did. The avis were Mekayim Kol HaTeira Kula, and yet their mitzvahs didn't have the advantage, they weren't real mitzvahs. The mitzvahs, the mile of mitzvahs that they affect Gashmias, that they connect Elikus with Gashmias, is only after Matan Torah. We say the mitzvahs, Chassidus always brings the Lashon of Chazal, the mitzvahs that the Avis did were reiches hayu, they were like a smell, they were superficial. So if they were so much lacking, so what was the purpose of those mitzvahs? Says the Lashon that the mitzvahs that the Avis did, shahayu hachana la mitzvahs shalachri matan Torah, even though the genuine mitzvahs, so to speak, the ultimate mitzvahs, are only the mitzvahs that had the power, the kayach of matan Torah, but the mitzvahs of the Avis needed to be the preparation for that, the build up to that, the lead up to that. So too the mitzvahs today that don't have that ultimate perfection that will be when Mashiach comes, but they're the build up, they're the hachana to the mitzvahs that will be when Mashiach comes. V'yesh leimar, could say, add to this, that even this idea is more applicable, it's more true about the mitzvahs that are in the time of the Beis HaMikdash over the mitzvahs that are during the time of Golus. Shegam inyan zeh, this aspect of mitzvahs that there are build-up, there are preparation, there are lead-up to the mitzvahs when Mashiach comes, is mainly in the mitzvahs shebizman habayis. Ki bizman habayis, because in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, ha'adam, the person who did the mitzvahs, v'ha'elam, and the world with which mitzvahs were done and in which mitzvahs were done, ha'yu bidarga nailis yeser mi bizman ha'galus. Everything was on a higher level in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. V'lachein, and therefore the mitzvahs were with greater perfection. V'lachein b'kiyum ha'mitzvahs shebizman habayis, in the mitzvahs during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, sheha'adam shekiyim ha'mitzvah, that the person who was mekayim the mitzvah v'adavar hagashmi, shabai kimu ha'mitzvah, and the physical object that the mitzvah was done with. Hayu b'darga nailas yeser, were in a higher level. So even though the ultimate way of doing mitzvahs will be when Mashiach comes, but what's second place is the time of the Beis HaMikdash. That was close to Shleimus. That was close to perfection. Haya Shleimus, there was a certain level of perfection, a certain degree of perfection, that's bidugmas hashleimus the kiyam HaMitzvah she'alasan love, that at least it's somewhat similar it's somewhat comparable to the shleimus of Lasad Lavi. So therefore, those are the mitzvahs in the time of the Beis Hamikdash that could really be a preparation because they come close. They're similar at least. V'lachein, you can't say there's no darkness. The whole world, the definition of Elam is Hel and Vehester. It's just that when it comes to darkness, we're in first place. The Golus is a much more intense darkness. But anything that's in Elam Asiyah is a certain degree of darkness. Till Mashiach comes. V'lachein, therefore, zeh shaham mitzvahs ta'achshav. That the mitzvahs today, heim hachana laha mitzvahs d'lasid lavei, are a preparation, they're a build-up to reach the ultimate way of mitzvahs when Mashiach comes. Hu be'ikr b'ha-mitzvah shebizman habayis. This is also true mainly regarding the mitzvahs that are in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So both the idea of mitzvahs with bittul, the hamshacha of mitzvahs, are more in the mitzvahs shebizman habayis. That the mitzvahs reach the Eir Shalamayla Meishtalshlos is more with the mitzvahs in the time of the Beis Hamikdash that have the element of bittul. And that we need mitzvahs today to prepare for the mitzvahs of La'asad Lavei when there will be the greatest bittul is also mainly in the mitzvahs in the time of the Beis Hamikdash that are closer, that are more similar. V'yesh leimar, the Rabbi in the brackets, shezeu gam me'atayim al. This is one of the reasons Shabizman Hagolus Nitesvu Kama V'Kama Inyanim B'Mitzvahs. Mitzvahs increased. There are many changes, many additions in mitzvahs, in Golus, including Hidurim, many mitzvahs that acquired more Hidurim, that we do with all kinds of Hidurim, that someone will say, where do all these Hidurim come from? Originally, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they did it much more plain. They did it much simpler. It's true. With all the years, all the generations, they get more Hidurim. And Minhagim, there's a lot of Minhagim that didn't used to be. The time of Gola, suddenly we're getting more Minhagim. What, are we more frum than our ancestors? He says, and not only in mitzvahs do you see that we are doing them with much more detail than they used to be performed, but v'gam b'teira, even teira, there was increase in teira in the time of Golos, more than what teira was originally. Leirak inyanim pratim, not just details, elagam inyanim klolim, general parts of teira were added during the time of Golos. The Mishnah nistira yidei Rabbeinu HaKadosh b'zman HaGolos. The Mishnayis was put together by Rabbeinu, by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi in Golos. It was the beginning of Golos when there wasn't yet the intensity, the difficulty of Golos. Umikol shkein Braisa v'Gemara shenistru b'zman HaGolos, and for sure the Braisa and the Gemara, the main parts of Torah, that they were added, they were put together, they were compiled during Golos. So both mitzvahs and Torah were added to, were developed during the time of Golos. L'cheira, what do we need it? Why do we have to be more frum, more diligent than the times of the Beis Hamikdash? The answer is b'chtei shetiyeh shleimus gam ba'aveda the Torah mitzvah shebizman hagolos. It says because we're missing something. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they have by themselves a shleimus. They were on a higher level, so their Torah mitzvahs have a shleimus, which gives it the ability to be a preparation for the mitzvahs of Lasad Lavi, because it has that similarity. We want that even though our mitzvahs can't be as good of a preparation, but they should also be as good of a preparation as possible. So to give them somewhat of a shleimus, even though we'll never reach the shleimus that was there in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, to give it as much of a shleimus as we could, so many details were added, so many extra hidurim and minhagim and portions of Torah, so therefore we also could claim some aspect of shleimus. V'al through this, gam al yidei ha'aveda shebizman hagolos, Yavayu lashleimus hamitzvos to Torah mitzvahs to Lasad Lavi. Through this, also the Golos mitzvahs will play some part in leading up and building up to the Giluyim of Lasad Lavi. So now the Rebbe is going to add a detail. So it comes out, we could speak about the Giluyim de La'asid Lavei resulting from the mitzvahs that are in the time of the Galus. That's true when you're talking about the Giluyim, the seeing, the accomplishment of changing Cheshach La'er. That results mainly from the mitzvahs during the Galus that have that achievement of changing Cheshach La'er, because in the Galus there's a big darkness. When we talk about the Giluyim of La'asid Lavei, that then will be Begilui, the Eir that the mitzvahs brought down in the world that's higher than Ishtalshalos will be visible and will be Begilui. That results primarily in the mitzvahs that are Bizman Beis HaMikdash, because those are the mitzvahs that bring about the Hamshacha more than the mitzvahs Shebizman HaGolus. And those are the mitzvahs that are the proper preparation that enable the mitzvahs of La'asid Lavei themselves to accomplish this Hamshacha, to bring down this air in a way that it's Begilu. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek's Maamar on HaBaim Yashresh Yaakov, he explained the words Yashresh Yaakov, that Ashrasha, the roots, is referring to the mitzvahs we do today. But the Tzemach Tzedek didn't translate the word HaBaim, coming. What's HaBaim? The Alter Rebbe also said Yashresh Yaakov refers to mitzvahs, and he said HaBaim means the coming into Galus, and it's the ones who come into Galus bring about this achievement of mitzvahs of Ashrasha, because the mitzvahs Bizman HaGalus are a preparation for the Giluyim de La'asid Lavei. So why didn't the Tzemach Tzedek, who seems to be saying a similar explanation in Yashresh Yaakov, also translate HaBaim? So till now the answer is, because the Tzemach Tzedek is talking about a different aspect of mitzvahs. When is it true to say HaBaim Yashresh Yaakov, the way it says in Torah, that the Hashrasha, the achievement, the greatness of mitzvahs is dependent, is connected with HaBaim, with those who are in Galus, because the Giluyim are dependent on the mitzvahs we do, specifically in the times of Galus. That's when we're focusing on one aspect of mitzvahs, the way they change Cheshach to Eir. The Tzemach Tzedek is talking about the other aspect of mitzvahs, that mitzvahs bring down the air that's higher than Ishtalshalos. And when you're talking about that aspect of mitzvahs, it doesn't make sense to tie it to HaBaim, to those who come in Golus, because this mile of mitzvahs is not connected specifically to the time of Golus. That's the explanation till now. Now remains one detail. So why does the Tzemach Tzedek interpret the pasuk as referring to that aspect of mitzvahs? Really, we could have ended the answer here, but the Rebbe wants to take it further. Hagufa. Why doesn't the Tzemach Tzedek explain? He's talking Yashresh Yaakov, referring to the achievement of mitzvahs. Why doesn't he discuss it, explain it as referring to the other mile in mitzvahs, the way mitzvahs change Cheshach to Eir, and then he could explain also the word HaBaim. So to explain this, the Rebbe is going to take us to one more aspect of the difference between these two parts of mitzvahs. V'hinei hachilok, the difference, another difference. Ben shnei inyanim hanal shebekiyum hamitzvahs. Another difference between these two inyanim and mitzvahs. Hamshacha shaydei hamitzvah v'abir shenas al yadam hu gam bahashaychos dahaveda achshav v'magili shieli mizel la'asid lavei. The difference is also in the relationship between what we're doing and what's achieved through what we're doing. The be'inyan ha'amshacha sha'idei ha'mitzvahs, when we're talking about the hamshacha through the mitzvahs, kivan de ha'shashleimus the ha'amshacha hi sha'amshacha tia begilui. What are we talking about? Mitzvahs bring down the eir shalamayla mishtalshus. Means they're bringing down a lekus into the world. In order for that to be an achievement, is when ultimately that hamshacha is visible, is begilui, when we see in the world elikus. So until it's visible, it's sort of not complete. The purpose of bringing elikus in the world is to bring down ultimately gili elikus in the world, except that the gili is finalized when Mashiach comes, but that's the purpose from the beginning. Kivan shashleimus the hamshacha, the purpose, the goal of a hamshacha, he hamshacha tia begili, is that it should be visible, that we should be visibly bringing elikus into the world. Haregam inyana shel ha'aveda ve'hamshacha atzma. So the purpose, the goal, the objective of what we're doing now, when we're talking about that aspect of mitzvahs, hu sheyiyah la'asid lavei hagili shala, is that this hamshacha ultimately should be begili, should be visible. That's when we're talking about that aspect of mitzvahs. But ube'inyan habira shal yidei ha-mitzvahs, when we're discussing another accomplishment, that mitzvahs are mivarer the cheshech, they refine the darkness, they change over the darkness to air. So then changing darkness to air is an end in itself. Then there's something separate that la'asid lavei will see visibly the achievement of this. We'll see visibly the hamshacha through this. But these are two separate things. This is not only a means to another end. The changing darkness to light is by itself an achievement. It's in itself an accomplishment. It says when we're talking about the bir shaydei mitzvahs, kivan shel yana shel ha'aveda hu bir ha'cheshech, what we're looking, our objective today is refining darkness, is changing darkness, working with darkness. Hainu sheba aveda zu nirgash. In the approach to this aveda, the feeling is sheyeshnei cheshech shetzarech levarei. This aveda is working with darkness, is with the approach that there's a darkness, and our purpose is to refine this darkness. That's what our work is. So we're working with the darkness. La'asid lavei will be a separate world when darkness will no longer exist. That's not the conclusion of this Aveda. That's a separate stage that's detached from this Aveda. Harei Aveda achshav. The Aveda today, that's an Aveda with darkness and to the darkness. Va'agili de la'asid lavei she'iyah aideza. And the final result of it that will be la'asid lavei v'asruach hatuma aver min ha'aretz, which will be in a world devoid of darkness, is not that you're seeing this hamshacha. It's a separate, so to speak, like a reward that comes in two separate stages. The two are detached from each other. So the hamshacha of the mitzvah, when you're talking about the hamshacha, the gilui of the hamshacha is the final stage of this hamshacha. The final shleimus of the hamshacha is when it's begili. So what we're doing now is we're beginning what ends with the hamshacha being begili when Mashiach comes. The bir ha'cheshech is an aveda now that brings about a reward. When Mashiach comes, we'll be in a stage when this aveda no longer exists, and then we'll appreciate how great it was. But the ultimate of the aveda is changing the cheshech, is is the thing itself, the act itself. So therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek is explaining the pasuk for some reason that it's referring to the aspect of mitzvahs, the hamshacha of mitzvahs. And therefore the Tzemach Tzedek didn't say HaBaim means galus, because when we talk about the hamshacha of the mitzvah itself, there's no advantage in the time of galus. So the Rebbe is going to say now, why is that? Because the pasuk is talking about an aspect of mitzvahs in which there's no detachment between the mitzvahs that we do today and the gili of la'asid lavei. How do we know that? Because the pasuk is referring to mitzvahs as a hashrasha. In a root, something that takes root, that gets planted and takes root in the ground, there's no purpose in the root for itself. The taking root is only a means to an end that something should grow from it. We can't say, oh, there's a root, Baruch Hashem, I have the roots, and then later I have something else, I have the plant also. The root is only a means for the plant to grow above ground. So therefore, describing mitzvahs as HaBaim, Yashresh, Yaakov, as the Hashrasha, has to be talking about that aspect of the mitzvahs, that the mitzvahs that we do today aren't in any way an end for themselves. They're only a means, a way, a medium to get to the growth of la'asid lavei. Which aspect of the mitzvahs could that description be true about? That all that we're doing today is bringing about the ultimate gilui, the hamshacha. Because the hamshacha is just a step towards bringing a gilui hamshacha, bringing visible halakus in the world. And therefore, since the pasuk, by describing mitzvahs as hashrasha, as roots, has to be referring to the aspect of mitzvahs that's being mamshech alekos, that's bringing down the er shalamayla mishtalshlos, and that aspect of mitzvahs has no connection specifically with the mitzvahs in the time of Golus. Therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek, unlike Teiraer, does not translate the word HaBaim as referring to the mitzvahs shebizman HaGolus. It says, V'alpiza yuvan, so here the Rebbe is going to say then. V'alpiza yuvan. With this we'll understand Zeh shebemaimer hanal, that in the Maimer, Einay mevi hapirush. He doesn't bring the explanation, Shahabaim koi ala yirida begalos. He doesn't bring the way the Alter Rebbe interprets that HaBaim refers to Galus, because mitzvahs are dependent on Galus. V'gam haseder d'shnei hapirushim b'hamaimer, and also the order of the two explanations that we asked about in the beginning we'll soon see. Ki mizeh shekiyum hamitzvahs achshav nikra b'kasav b'shem hashrasha, from the fact that in this pasuk mitzvahs are referred to as hashrasha, as roots, planting, seeding, seeds taking roots. That when you talk about hashrasha, in yana shal hashrasha zriya, the objective, the purpose of roots, he b'chtei lahavi tzmichas, for the growth. There's no aspect of the roots that's an end in itself. Muchach, from this the Tzemach Tzedek says we see sheha'inyin dekiyum hamitzvahs shebepasuk zeh hu ha'amshacha sha'idei hamitzvah. Which aspect of mitzvahs are we referring to when we describe mitzvahs as hashrasha? The amshacha through the mitzvahs, because that's the aspect of the mitzvahs that could be looked at that it's solely a medium, a means to an end. It's not referring in this pasuk to the other aspect of mitzvahs that they're mevarer the chayshach, because the refinement of the darkness is an end for itself. It's something for itself. Therefore, einay mevi kana pirush. The Tzemach Tzedek doesn't bring here the explanation. HaBaim koi ala yirida begalos, that HaBaim refers to galos like the Alter Rebbe does. And because the mitzvahs have an advantage, dafka bizman hagalos, kimaylas ha'aveda shebizman hagalos, that advantage in HaBaim, in mitzvahs that are done at the time of galos, hi b'negei lahabira shaydei mitzvah. That's true regarding the bira, like we said, because bizman hagalos is a greater cheshach. Masha enkein ha'amshacha shaydei mitzvah, the amshacha through the mitzvah, he yoser b'ha'aveda shebizman habayis. That's more true about the aveda shebizman habayis. Now, there's an obvious question over here. I don't know the answer to. So why does the Alter Rebbe translate HaBaim? So usually the Rebbe would give this explanation, but then he would have to explain Teiraer also. Teiraer Alter Rebbe is also referring to the pasuk that describes mitzvahs as hashrasha, and nevertheless he translates the word HaBaim. So the Rebbe in this Maamar is coming to explain the Tzemach Tzedek's Maamar, but somehow we have to understand then why does the Alter Rebbe able to say HaBaim even though it calls it hashrasha. But in the beginning of the Maamar there was another question. The Tzemach Tzedek brought two pirushim in HaBaim Yashresh Yaakov. The first pirush he brought was from the Targum Yonis ben Uziel, that HaBaim means the coming, those who come to Eretz Yisrael in the times of Mashiach, La'asad Lavi. Yashresh Yaakov then will be the Gilui Sheirish HaNeshama. Will be the Gilui, the Sheirish HaNeshama, he said, is the way the Neshama is mushash, higher than Ishtalshalos, and that La'asad Lavi will be Begilui, the Neshama, the way it's rooted in the air, that's higher, the air Eliki, and it will be the Gilui of Elikus Shalamayla Mishtalshalos. Then the Tzemach Tzedek said Yashresh Yaakov refers to mitzvahs. And the Rebbe said the connection between the two interpretations is because mitzvahs today bring about the gilui of the Sheirish and the Neshama the way it's higher than the Ishtalshalos. So the question was, then first we should bring that Yashresh Yaakov goes on mitzvahs, and then that Yashresh Yaakov goes on Tamar and Yishilid in the Beis Yaakov, the Gilui Sheirish and Neshama, because that's the sequence. First we do mitzvahs, and they bring about the Gilui Sheirish and Neshama. So now the Rebbe is going to answer that question. V'zeu, according to what we explained until now, will answer the question of the order, the sequence in the Maamar. V'zeu, gamma shapira sheyashresh Yaakov koy al kiyum mitzvahs achshav. the explanation that it refers to mitzvahs that we do today. It comes after the explanation. Yashresh Yaakov koyal gili sheirish haneshama she'elasid lavei. Ki hamshacha shaydekiyam hamitzvahs achshav shebepasuk Yashresh Yaakov hi hamshacha sheirish haneshama. What is the hamshacha through mitzvahs? Is the hamshacha of the sheirish haneshama. He says, now since the mitzvahs that we're talking about, the aspect of mitzvahs that we're referring to in the Maamar, is the hamshacha through mitzvahs, that regarding the hamshacha through mitzvahs, the sole objective, the whole purpose of the hamshacha is that it should ultimately be begili. Until that, we didn't achieve anything. So therefore, the Maamar brings first the pirush of Yisyelidin the Beis Yaakov of the Targum Yenasa, that's describing Gili Sheirish Haneshama, because that's the objective, that's the purpose, that's the entire goal in the Hamshacha through mitzvahs, the way the Hamshacha is being discussed in this pasuk, the aspect of the Hamshacha. In Yana Shal Hamshacha, Hu Shetia La'asad Lavi Begilu Yisyelidun. The purpose and the goal of the Hamshacha is that La'asad Lavi, it should be Begili. And therefore, the Maamar starts off with the Pirush Targum Yenason, because that's the objective, that's the goal. Vav. V'tzarech lahav. The Lefi Bir Hanal, according to this whole explanation, Hashaychas dekiyim hamitzvahs achshav, the connection between the two pirushim in the Maamar of the Tzemach Tzedek, the second pirush, which is that Yashresh Yaakov refers to the mitzvahs that we do today. Lahageula, to the first pirush in Yashresh Yaakov, the Targum Yenasa, the first one that the Maamar brings, which is that HaBaim refers to the time of the Gula, pirush Arishin, hu beha'inyan de Yashresh Yaakov. The connection between them is because in the second pirush that refers to mitzvahs as Yashresh Yaakov, the hamshacha is the roots of the mitzvahs. That connected with the Geula, because that's when we'll see this hamshacha. She'enyana shel hamshachas hasheirish achshav, the purpose of bringing down the sheirish, the oir shel l'mayla b'shtalshlos, through mitzvahs today, hu she'hamshacha tia begilui, is in order that the hamshacha should be begilui. So the connection between them is the Yashresh Yaakov. So therefore he brings two pirushim in HaBaim, Yashresh Yaakov, that are connected because they're both the hashrasha of the second pirush is the hashrasha of the first pirush. The hashrasha of the second pirush, which is what we're bringing down through mitzvahs, reaches its gilui in the hashrasha of the first, Yisyelidin the Beis Yaakov. But in the Maamar, he's going to now make a more, if we look precisely at the wording, Mizeh she'emer ba Maamar b'tchilasi, lifnei shemaitik ha-targum yenasan, she'ha-targum yenasan, mefaresh ha-pasuk ala geula, muvan shezeu ikar ha-pirush. It says, but in the Maamar, he doesn't say, HaBaim Yashresh Yaakov, that the Targum Yenasan says that Yashresh Yaakov is Yisyelidin the Beis Yaakov, the Gili Sheirish Haneshama, which is the Gili of the mitzvahs we do today. He says the Targum Yenasan says it's going on the Geula, which is not the direct connection with the second pirush. It's what happens during the Geula in Yashresh Yaakov. So you should first bring the Targum Yenasan says that Yashresh Yaakov is Yisyelidin the Beis Yaakov, and then he could say that's HaBaim during the Geula. But that's not the way the Tzemach Tzedek says it. Umizeh mashma, from this implies the Zesh HaPirush Yashresh Yaakov Koyal mitzvahs, Koyal kiyuma mitzvahs achshav, that Yashresh Yaakov, the second pirush, that it's referring to mitzvahs, bala achri behemshech lepirush hatargum yenasan, is not only because the words Yashresh Yaakov, according to the Targum Yenasan, which is the Gili Sheirish Haneshama, is the purpose and the goal in Yashresh Yaakov in the second pirush in the mitzvahs. It's not only that, because then what he should bring first is Yisyelidin the Beis Yaakov. He brings first the Geula. Hu lefi shekiyum ha-mitzvahs achshav ba behemshech leklolos inyan ha-geula. Is because what he wants to bring first is not just the Gili Sheirish HaNeshama that's in the Pirush Targum Yenasan, but somehow the Inyan HaGeula is what he wants to bring before the second Pirush. And the Rebbe is going to say, well, we'll learn it next time. The reason for that is because the goal of the Tzemach Tzedek is not just the whole philosophy that we said until now, but because he wants to bring the Targum Yonasan first, to bring first the Pirush Geula, because by bringing Geula earlier in the Maamar, that makes that the Geula comes earlier by Peil Mamish.